Packing for Mars, The Curious Science of Life in the Void, by Mary Roach. Introduction. Imagine, for a moment, that you're floating in a tiny metal box, hundreds of miles above the Earth. You've been in this box, no bigger than the front seat of a small car, for nearly 2 weeks with one other person. There's no shower, no change of clothes, and the bathroom situation is, well, let's just say it's complicated. You glance out the window and see something breathtaking, a sight no human had ever witnessed in quite this way before. A full, brilliant moon hanging against the infinite blackness of space, with the delicate, swirling clouds of Earth far below. It's a moment of pure, sublime beauty. You're overwhelmed with awe. You reach for the microphone to describe this cosmic majesty to mission control. But before you can, your crewmate's voice crackles through the headset with a far more urgent announcement: Borman's dumping urine. A few seconds later, as a sun-illuminated flurry of flash-frozen wastewater droplets creates its own beautiful, strange constellation outside your window, you hear your own voice, captured on the mission transcript for all time, saying, "What a sight to behold." Welcome to the strange, messy, and utterly fascinating reality of human space travel. Today, we're diving into a book that pulls back the curtain on the grand spectacle of space exploration to reveal the hilarious, humbling, and often disgusting human truths behind it. We're talking about Packing for Mars, The Curious Science of Life in the Void by the brilliant Mary Roach. Mary Roach isn't your typical science writer. She doesn't focus on the gleaming rockets or the triumphant headlines. Instead, she's a fearless explorer of the back alleys of science, the places where things get weird, uncomfortable, and profoundly human. With her signature wit and relentless curiosity, she has explored what happens to human bodies after we die, the science of sex, and the bizarre world of the military. But in Packing for Mars, she takes on the final frontier. This book isn't about the physics of getting to Mars. It's about the biology and psychology of surviving the trip. It asks the questions that the glorious documentaries tend to skip. What's it like to not shower for 2 weeks? How do you go to the bathroom in zero gravity? What happens if you get sick, or homesick, or just plain sick of your crewmates? Can you have sex in space? And what do you do if someone dies on the way to another planet? These aren't just trivial details. They are the central, make-or-break challenges of sending fragile, Earth-evolved human beings into an environment that is actively trying to kill them. By the end of our journey today, I promise you this: you will understand that the greatest obstacle to exploring the cosmos isn't building a faster rocket. It's the simple, messy, and magnificent problem of being human. You'll see your own body, your own daily routines, and your home planet in a completely new light. And you'll discover that the right stuff for space travel isn't just about courage, it's about having an iron stomach, a rock-solid sense of humor, and an infinite capacity for the absurd. So, strap in. We're about to unpack the curious science of life in the void. Book summary. To a rocket scientist, you and I are a problem. In fact, we are the single most irritating, unpredictable, and inefficient piece of machinery they will ever have to work with. A solar panel is simple. A thruster nozzle is reliable. They don't need to eat, they don't excrete, they don't get lonely, and they don't fall in love with a mission commander. Their parts don't start to wither away just because gravity is gone. But us? We are a walking, talking bundle of complications. We need food, water, and oxygen. We have egos. We have fluctuating metabolisms. We get bored. And our bodies, finely tuned over millions of years for life on a planet with a thick atmosphere, constant gravity, and a 24-hour day, start to rebel the moment we leave. This is the central truth that Mary Roach unpacks in Packing for Mars. The grand adventure of space exploration isn't just a story of engineering and physics, it's a story of biology and psychology. It's the story of taking an organism, us, and suspending it in the lethal wasteland of space, and then trying to figure out how to keep it from falling apart, both physically and mentally. It all starts with a simple question: how do you even choose someone for a journey like this? We all have this image of the first astronauts, the Mercury 7. They were the heroes, the test pilots with the right stuff. They were men defined by their charisma, their swagger, and their almost reckless bravery. They were the kind of men who flew screaming fast fighter jets, breaking sound barriers and narrowly avoiding death as their 9-to-5 job. For the early days of spaceflight, the first orbits, the first spacewalks, the first trip to the moon, that kind of bravado was exactly what was needed. Seriously dangerous things were happening on a regular basis. But as space travel became more routine, something strange happened. It became boring. Astronaut Gene Cernan, one-off last man to walk on the moon, wrote that on the way there, not much happened. He joked he should have brought some crossword puzzles. The job of an astronaut shifted from pure exploration to experimentation. It was no longer about being the first, but about assembling orbiting science labs, launching satellites, and fixing toilets. The right stuff changed. NASA's selection criteria began to include things you'd never associate with a fighter jock: capacity to tolerate boredom, ability to relate to others with sensitivity, regard, and empathy, and even a sense of humor. They weren't looking for Top Gun anymore. They were looking for a highly competent, emotionally stable, and exceptionally patient lab partner. Mary Roach takes us inside this modern selection process, specifically to the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, to see just how deep this search for the right temperament goes. What she finds is both brilliant and wonderfully bizarre. The 10 finalists for the Japanese Astronaut Corps are locked in an isolation chamber for 1 week. They are observed 24/7 by a panel of psychologists through closed-circuit cameras. And what are these aspiring heroes asked to do? They are asked to fold 1,000 paper cranes. Origami. It sounds absurd, but it's genius. According to Japanese tradition, folding 1,000 cranes grants a person health and longevity. For JAXA, it's a test of patience and accuracy under pressure. As the days go by and the deadline nears, do a candidate's creases get sloppy? How do their first 10 cranes compare to their last 10? As one psychologist put it, a sloppy crane can reveal impatience under stress. And that's crucial, because 90% of a typical mission on the International Space Station is rote work: assembling, repairing, and maintaining the spacecraft. It's tedious work, often done while wearing a bulky, pressurized suit with a limited oxygen supply ticking away. You can't be the kind of person who gets frustrated and does a haphazard job when you're tightening the bolts that hold a billion-dollar laboratory together. But the tests get even stranger. The candidates' dirty dishes are secretly wheeled away and photographed after every meal. The psychologists analyze what they ate and how they left their plates. Did candidate C eat her chicken skin? Did candidate G hide his uneaten vegetables? It sounds like something out of a quirky spy movie, but it's about seeing who is tidy, who follows instructions precisely, and who is mindful of living in a small, shared space. They even have a self-merits presentation, which is less like a job interview and more like a summer camp talent show. One candidate sings songs in 4 languages. Another does 40 push-ups in 30 seconds. And one pilot, in a moment of questionable judgment, demonstrates his ice-breaking technique for entertaining ladies at bars, curling his tongue into the shape of 2 tacos. It all seems so childish. Origami, Lego robots, talent shows. But it reveals a profound shift in what it means to be an astronaut. The ideal candidate today is an exceptionally high-achieving adult who can follow rules and take direction like a well-behaved child. As one JAXA official explained, going into space is like attending a very small, very elite military boarding school. You have to be brilliant, but you also have to be someone who doesn't make waves. This psychological screening is so intense because once you're in space, there's no escape. The isolation and confinement are relentless, and they can break even the strongest minds. This is where the story turns from the quirky to the deeply unsettling. Mary Roach takes us to Moscow, to the Institute of Biomedical Problems, where researchers have been locking people in simulated spaceships for decades to study the perilous psychology of isolation and confinement. These aren't just academic studies. They're high-stakes human experiments that have sometimes gone horribly wrong. One of the most infamous was a 1999 simulation called Sphinx. The researchers put together an international crew in a cramped module to see how different cultures would interact. On New Year's Day, fueled by smuggled vodka, the experiment devolved into chaos. 2 Russian subjects got into a bloody fistfight. The Russian commander then cornered the Canadian female crew member, Judith Lapierre, and forcibly kissed her twice. The fallout was immense. The hatch between the international and Russian modules was sealed. The Japanese crew member quit. Lapierre complained to the space agencies, but was initially accused of overreacting. Russian psychologists explained that this was just how Russian men were. A bloody nose was a friendly fight, and a forceful kiss at a party was nothing. It was a stark lesson in just how quickly civility can break down when people are trapped together. But it also revealed a darker truth. Space agencies have a long history of downplaying or hiding these psychological problems. They fear that if the public knew about the drunken brawls, the sexual tensions, and the emotional breakdowns, funding would disappear. As one researcher bluntly put it, if a space agency comes out and says, "Oh, all of these problems happen," then people say, "Why do we go to space? It's too risky." The result is a dangerous culture of silence. Astronauts themselves are afraid to admit they're struggling, fearing they'll be grounded. As one cosmonaut explained, every communication with a psychologist means a special note in your file. So, they try not to ask for help. When you're trapped in a small space for months on end, the anger and frustration have to go somewhere. There are 3 targets: your crewmates, mission control, or yourself. Most astronauts avoid taking it out on their crewmates, because you depend on that person for your survival. So, they often displace their hostility onto mission control. From hundreds of miles away, they'll argue with the ground crew over schedules, complain about the food, or nitpick instructions. It's a time-honored tradition. The third option is the most dangerous, turning the hostility inward. The result is often depression. Cosmonaut Alexander Lavikin, who spent 6 months on the Mir space station, confided that there were moments when he felt so trapped and hopeless that he thought about suicide. "I wanted to hang myself," he said. Of course, it's impossible because of weightlessness. It's not just the confinement that gets to you. It's the profound separation from Earth. Everything about our existence is tied to this planet. When astronauts are deprived of it, they begin to miss the simplest things with an aching intensity. They miss the smell of rain. They miss the feeling of walking on grass. They miss seeing trees and flowers. Submarine crews will haunt the sonar room just to listen to the sounds of whale songs, to remind themselves that a natural world still exists. On a mission to Mars, once the Earth shrinks to a tiny blue dot and then disappears from view, there will be nothing to see outside the window but blackness. It's a level of sensory deprivation no human has ever experienced. In the early days, psychologists worried that this profound separation could literally drive an astronaut insane. They called it the breakaway effect, a feeling of detachment from Earth experienced by high-altitude pilots. Some felt a strange euphoria, a feeling of being a king or nearer to God. Others felt a deep panic, something akin to schizophrenia. This fear was so real that when Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space, the manual controls of his Vostok capsule were locked. He was given a sealed envelope with a secret combination to unlock them, but only if Mission Control deemed him sane enough to take over. They were terrified he might go mad and sabotage the mission. The breakaway effect did manifest, but not as madness. It came as a powerful, almost spiritual euphoria. During NASA's first spacewalk, astronaut Ed White was so overcome with joy that he refused to come back inside the capsule. Mission Control had to repeatedly order him back in. He called it the saddest moment of my life. It's a beautiful thought, being overcome with the wonder of space. But even that wonder can't protect the human body from its own rebellion. Long before the mind starts to fray, the body begins to revolt. And the first thing it does, for about 75% of astronauts, is puke. Space motion sickness is the secret misery of the astronaut corps. It's not just a minor inconvenience, it can be completely incapacitating. The problem is a fundamental sensory conflict. On Earth, your eyes, your inner ear, and your body all agree on which way is up. Your inner ear contains tiny calcium pebbles called otoliths that rest on a bed of fine hairs. When you stand up, gravity pulls them down. When you lie on your side, they shift to the side. Your brain gets a constant, reliable signal about your orientation. In zero gravity, those otoliths just float. If you turn your head suddenly, they bounce around like pinballs. Your inner ear is telling your brain that you just stood up, laid down, and did a somersault all at once, while your eyes are telling you that you're perfectly still. The brain, utterly confused by these conflicting signals, triggers the only response it knows for when something is deeply wrong: nausea. For the early astronauts, admitting to motion sickness was a sign of weakness. Frank Borman, the commander of Apollo 8, was sick as a dog all the way to the moon but covered it up. It wasn't until Apollo 9, when astronaut Rusty Schweickart got violently ill right before a critical spacewalk, that the problem was dragged out into the open. The mission was a crucial test of the life support backpack that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin would wear on the moon. Schweickart was so sick, he worried he was about to personally lose the moon race for the United States. And he faced a terrifying prospect: what happens if you vomit inside your helmet during a spacewalk? You die, he said bluntly. The vomit would just float there, and you'd have no way to get it away from your nose and mouth. You would suffocate. While modern spacesuits have airflow systems designed to prevent this, it remains one of the most dreaded scenarios for an astronaut. The culture of silence around motion sickness was so strong that even though Rusty Schweickart helped bring the issue to light, he never flew another mission. But motion sickness is just the opening act in the body's zero-gravity drama. The real damage happens slowly, silently, and to the very structure of your being. Our bodies are masterpieces of efficiency. The mantra is use it or lose it. When you lift weights, your muscles grow stronger. When you run, your bones become denser to handle the impact. Your body is constantly calibrating, maintaining just enough strength for the demands you place on it. In space, there are no demands. You don't walk, you float. You don't lift things, you guide them. With the load of gravity lifted, the body begins a process of systematic self-destruction. The muscles start to atrophy. And more alarmingly, the bones begin to dissolve. Astronauts lose bone mass at a rate of about 1 to 2% per month. A 6-month stay on the space station can lead to a 15 to 20% loss of bone in critical areas like the hips. This is a level of osteoporosis that would put an elderly woman on Earth at high risk of a fracture. Some studies suggest that this bone loss is never fully recovered. To study this, space agencies don't have to send people to space. They can simulate it right here on Earth through the bizarre science of bed rest studies. NASA will literally pay you thousands of dollars to lie in bed for 3 months straight. You don't get up for anything? Not to eat, not to shower, not to use the toilet. You stay horizontal, often with your head tilted down 6 degrees to mimic the fluid shifts that happen in space. Mary Roach introduces us to the Terranauts, the volunteers who endure this mind-numbing boredom for science and a paycheck. For them, it's a modern-day debtor's prison, a way to pay off bills while their bodies slowly deteriorate. Their skeletons thin, their muscles waste away, and they provide crucial data on how to counteract these effects for long-duration space missions. And while the Terranauts are dealing with the slow decay of their bodies, they are also forced to confront one of the most notoriously difficult engineering challenges of spaceflight: going to the bathroom while lying down. This brings us to what Mary Roach calls separation anxiety. It is, without a doubt, the most talked about and comically frustrating aspect of life in space. On Earth, gravity is our silent partner in the bathroom. It ensures that things go where they're supposed to go. In space, there is no down. The early Apollo astronauts didn't have a toilet. They had the infamous fecal bag. It was a clear plastic sack with an adhesive ring on top that you were supposed to stick to your backside. It rarely fit properly. It pulled hairs. And because of the lack of gravity, nothing would separate on its own. The astronaut had to use a small pocket in the bag called a finger cot to manually assist the process. The ordeal wasn't over then. Before sealing the bag, you had to squeeze in a packet of germicide and knead it through the contents to prevent bacteria from producing gas that could cause the bag to burst. The whole process could take up to 45 minutes and was so distasteful that astronauts would use medication to avoid it altogether. Escapees, free-floating turds, were a common and horrifying occurrence. The mission transcript from Apollo 10 contains a legendary exchange where the crew is trying to figure out whose turd is floating through the air. The engineers knew they had to do better. So they designed the first space toilet for the space shuttle. It was a technological marvel that worked like a high-tech shop vac, using airflow instead of water. But it came with its own set of bizarre problems. To use it, an astronaut has to get into the perfect position, because the opening is only 4 inches wide. To help with this, NASA created the positional trainer, a toilet bowl with a camera inside and a monitor on the wall, so you can watch a live feed of your own rear end to ensure proper alignment. It's the potty cam. Even with perfect aim, new horrors emerged. Because the holding tank was exposed to the vacuum of space to freeze dry the waste, a phenomenon known as fecal popcorning could occur. When a fresh contribution hit the frozen wall of the tank, it could bounce and popcorn its way back up the tube, leading to the even more dreaded fecal decapitation if the astronaut closed the slider gate at the wrong moment. This isn't just gross, it's a mission-critical problem. A malfunctioning toilet can compromise the crew's health, morale, and sanity. The ongoing saga of the zero-gravity toilet is a perfect metaphor for the entire challenge of human spaceflight, taking a simple, mundane act and turning it into a complex, high-stakes engineering puzzle. The same is true for eating. Back on Earth, a corned beef sandwich is just lunch. In space, it's a federal incident. That's what astronaut John Young discovered when he smuggled a sandwich from Wolfie's Delicatessen aboard Gemini 3. When he took it out for a bite, it started to crumble. Crumbs in zero gravity don't fall to the floor. They float. They can get into sensitive equipment, into an astronaut's eye, or be inhaled. The corned beef sandwich incident led to a congressional hearing and a formal reprimand for Young. Early space food was a culinary nightmare driven by engineering constraints. It had to be lightweight, compact, and crumb-free. The result was a menu of dehydrated, compressed food cubes, coated in an edible gelatin to hold them together. Jim Lovell described the coating as leaving a bad taste and a film on the roof of his mouth. There were also tubes of pureed food, essentially baby food for heroes. Astronauts hated it. It was bland, strange, and a constant reminder of how far from a normal life they were. Making it worse, Many of the early space food scientists were military veterinarians. They were used to designing feed for research animals, where the only concerns were cost, nutrition, and ease of use. Palatability wasn't a factor. As one of them said, "When I feed animals, I just mix up a bag of feed. Why can't we do that with astronauts?" And sometimes, they did. One researcher even developed astronaut chow, pelletized formula foods. It's no wonder astronauts often returned from missions having lost a significant amount of weight. They simply didn't want to eat. Then there's the question of sex. It's the ultimate taboo topic at NASA. Officially, it doesn't exist. But unofficially, the speculation is endless. Mary Roach dives into the rumors, like the legendary Three Dolphin Club, a supposed secret experiment where a third person was needed to help a couple stay together during intercourse in a neutral buoyancy tank. It's a fantastic story, but it's just that, a story, a hoax that has taken on a life of its own. The reality is that while privacy is scarce, the stakes are simply too high. For an astronaut who has dedicated their entire life to their career, a scandal would mean never flying again. But the biological questions are real and pressing. Could conception even happen in zero gravity? How would a fetus develop without the constant pull of gravity to orient it? And what about the increased radiation outside Earth's protective atmosphere, which could be devastating to dividing cells? The few experiments that have been done, sending rat sperm and pregnant rats into space, have yielded concerning results. The truth is, we know almost nothing. All of these challenges, the psychological strain, the physical decay, the daily frustrations of eating and hygiene, they all converge on the ultimate goal, a human mission to Mars. A trip to Mars isn't a 2-week jaunt to the moon. It's a 2 to 3 year commitment. You can't pack 3 years' worth of food, water, and oxygen. It would be too heavy to launch. So, you have to get creative. You have to recycle everything. This is where the science gets truly extreme. Astronauts on the International Space Station already drink their own recycled sweat and urine. For a Mars mission, engineers have explored even more radical ideas. What if the spacecraft structures were made of edible plastics? What if you could eat your own clothes after you were done wearing them? And then there's the ultimate taboo. What if you could hydrolyze human feces back into its basic components and turn it into shitburgers? When this idea was floated at a NASA workshop, the astronauts in attendance made it very clear, that was a line they would not cross. The journey to Mars forces us to confront the absolute limits of what is possible and what is acceptable. It forces us to ask the big question, is it worth it? A manned mission to Mars could cost $500 billion. That's money that could be spent on education, on healthcare, on solving problems here on Earth. What good will come of it, especially when robots can do much of the science for a fraction of the cost? Mary Roach doesn't give us a simple answer. Instead, she leaves us with the story of Benjamin Franklin. When he witnessed one of the first manned hot air balloon flights in the 1780s, someone asked him, "What use is it?" Franklin replied, "What use is a newborn baby?" Maybe that's the point. Space exploration isn't just about practical payoffs. It's about something deeper. It's about the human spirit's desire to do something difficult, something impractical, simply because we can. It's about joining hands and saying, "I bet we can do this." In a world that is increasingly lived through simulations, where we travel by satellite and socialize on screens, there is something profoundly real and inspiring about the messy, inconvenient, and glorious struggle of sending a human being to another world. It's a reminder that we are not just minds floating in cyberspace, we are bodies, with all their needs, their frailties, and their incredible resilience. And sometimes, the most beautiful sight in the universe isn't a distant galaxy, but a simple, fleeting constellation of frozen pea, reminding us that even in the sublime void, we are, and always will be, wonderfully, messily, and absurdly human. Commentary. As we come to the end of our journey through packing for Mars, it's easy to get lost in the hilarious and sometimes shocking details: the floating turds, the urine drinking, the 1,000 paper cranes. And that's certainly part of the fun. Mary Roach is a master at finding the absurdity in the serious world of science. But if we stop there, we miss the profound heart of this book. This isn't just a collection of weird facts about space. It's a deeply moving exploration of what it means to be human, written from the most alien perspective imaginable. The most powerful lesson for me is one of profound humility. We walk around on this planet as if we own the place, as if our bodies and minds are infinitely adaptable. But this book is a stark reminder that we are creatures of Earth, through and through. Every cell in our bodies, every process from digestion to balance to sleep, is exquisitely designed for a world with 1 g of gravity, a 24-hour day, and a thick, protective atmosphere. The moment you take that away, our magnificent human machine starts to sputter and break down in the most fundamental ways. It makes you look at your own life with a new sense of wonder. The simple act of standing up is a quiet miracle of physiology. The ability to take a shower, to eat a messy sandwich, to simply lie down in your own bed at the end of the day, these aren't just comforts. They are privileges granted to us by our home planet. Space travel reveals how fragile that privilege is. It also redefines what it means to be a hero. We tend to think of astronauts as superhuman figures, unflappable and fearless. But Mary Roach shows us their vulnerability. She shows us Rusty Schweickart, on the verge of making history, terrified that he's going to throw up and derail the entire Apollo program. She shows us Frank Borman, commander of the first mission to orbit the Moon, quietly suffering from motion sickness. She shows us the astronauts of Gemini 7, enduring 2 weeks of grime and discomfort, their biggest challenges not cosmic rays, but boredom and body odor. The heroism here isn't in the absence of fear or weakness. It's in the endurance of it. It's in the quiet, unglamorous work of managing the messy realities of the human body and mind, day after day, in an environment that offers no relief. The right stuff isn't just about facing death, it's about facing the relentless, grinding discomfort of being alive in the wrong place. So, how can we apply these lessons to our own lives, right here on solid ground? Here are a few simple ideas. First, practice a little gravity appreciation. The next time you pour a glass of water, watch it fall cleanly into the glass. The next time you drop your keys, instead of getting frustrated, take a half-second to marvel at the invisible force that holds our entire world together. This book teaches you that the most mundane aspects of our reality are actually extraordinary. Acknowledging that can bring a sense of wonder to your everyday life. Second, embrace the human factor in your own challenges. When we pursue a big goal, whether it's in school, in sports, or in our personal lives, we often focus only on the grand strategy. We forget about the human element, the need for rest, the importance of morale, the reality of burnout. This book is a powerful reminder that you can have the most brilliant rocket, but if the astronaut is miserable, the mission will fail. Pay attention to the small, human things, for yourself and for others. A good meal, a moment of rest, a shared laugh, these aren't distractions from the mission. They are essential parts of it. Finally, find the humor in the struggle. The astronauts who seem to thrive are the ones who can laugh at the absurdity of it all, the floating feces, the malfunctioning toilets, the general indignity of it all. Life is full of challenges that are messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes just plain ridiculous. The ability to step back and see the humor in your own human problems is not just a coping mechanism, it's a form of wisdom. That was a summary of Packing for Mars by Mary Roach. We certainly touched on the major themes and some of the most memorable stories today, but I want to be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you make the journey yourself. The true magic of this book is in Mary Roach's voice, her wit, her empathy, and her incredible eye for detail. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about has sparked your curiosity or made you laugh, I urge you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts, it's an experience that will genuinely change the way you see our world and our place in the universe. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to click that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know that this work is making a difference, and it ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together. Thank you for listening.